Hello everybody, welcome back to the introduction to GameMaker Tutorials. This is the final part of the very basic tutorial, starting our first game with using the drag and drop method. Today we're just going to finish it off with a very basic high score table, so let's crack on and get into it. Okay, so what we need to do is get the score value that's being tallied up whilst we're playing the game and pop that into a high score table at the end once we've lost all our life. So the game needs to know when the game is over, so when we've lost all our life, and it also needs to know that it needs to save the score value at the end, and then obviously we just need to pop it into a high score table for the player to be able to see. Now, there are various ways that you can also add a name to the high scores. You can either use the inbuilt window option, which is okay for very, very basic stuff. But I think if you want to do anything more than that, you need to create your own virtual keyboard and have it input that way. But that's probably a bit above using the basic drag and drop as we are in here. So we'll just do it without the name to start with. So first of all, what we're going to want to do is create a room for the high scores to be stored in and shown. So we'll just do a duplicate of the main menu screen here. We'll get rid of the title screen there. We'll rename it. So we'll just call this Room High Scores. So we've got all the size and everything remains the same, so that's good for us. Okay, we're not going to put anything in there yet, so we'll just save it and we'll just drag it to the end because it's going to be the last room that we want them to come into once the game's been finished. So what we need to do next is to let the game know when our score has to be saved and put into the high score table because we've lost our life. So to do this, we're going to create a controller object. Now the controller object is just going to work in the background, keeping an eye on our life, and when it runs out, that's when it will start to take action. So we'll put this in an end step event, so it will look at the end of every step to see if what's happened has happened, and what we want to do is test whether our health has run out. So we will look at this, and what we want it to be is smaller than the value of 1. So obviously if we were to do equal to 0, it might not actually be equal to 0. It might go into a minus figure depending on how we set up the amount of life we have and how much life is deducted when we do things that are wrong. But if we go smaller than 1, then we know as soon as it gets to that point it is 0 or below, in which case we know that we're dead and we're in trouble. Okay, so if the health is smaller than 1, the first thing we want to do is for it to store the score. Now, unfortunately, there's no way to get around this. We're going to have to use a little bit of code because, as you might be aware, if you start to try and create games using the older tutorial books, GameMaker's actually taken out a lot of the options for adding scores and things like that using the drag and drop icons. The only one that is actually remaining is the clear high score button. I don't know why. I'm sure someone who knows these things could tell me, but if we want to add a high score to the table using the drag and drop, we still have to use a basic bit of code. So we'll do this, and hopefully it won't be too complicated for those that are starting. So we use the curly brackets just to keep our code all nice and tidy, and what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to do a high score add. So using this little bit of code here, we got the person's name if we were putting the person's name in, but we won't be putting the name in this time, and we want it to score the variable of score as the high score. So we just need to put in a very basic bit of code just like that, and then once it's stored that, what we can do actually is we can give this a little name so that we know what it's doing. So we do 3 lines and just put in add high score. That just makes it do a note so that it's not actually part of the code. As you can see, it's stored in green, so we know it's not part of the code, and that way we can see what the execute code's actually doing there. And then once we've done that, we're going to want to go on to the next room. So all that is doing there is at the end of the go, if our health has gone below 1, so we've died, it's going to add the high score to the table, and it's going to take us to the next room. So in order for that to work, what we want to do is put that into the main room. So let's get rid of this grid. If we put in a controller object in this main room, obviously it hasn't got a sprite attached to it, so it's just this little question mark. We won't be able to see it. The other one there is to do with storing our score, as you'd have seen in the earlier tutorials. And all that's going to do is run in the background, checking to see if we've died. And if we have, it's going to store our score and put it into the high score table. Now, the very basic high score table that's built within GameMaker that we use in here will test the top 10 scores, and if the new score is above the lowest one in 10th position, it'll add it to the table. If it's not, it'll just ignore it. So we don't have to worry about doing any of that. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is to draw the table of the high scores in the final room. So we're going to need to create another object to do that, and we can call this object high score table, so we know what it's doing. It doesn't need to have a sprite. What we will need is a draw event. Oh, if it works. Computer's being a bit slow today for some reason. Okay, so we create a draw event, and what we're going to want it to do is to draw the high score table. Now again, we haven't got the ability to do that within here, so we're just going to have to create a little bit of code for it to work. So again, we'll put a little comment at the top so that we know what it's doing. So draw high score table, and then we'll just put our code into the brackets, and what we want to do is draw, bring it up like that, and we just got to choose the coordinates of where the table is going to be drawn. So the inbuilt high score table, what it'll do is it'll just compact it within whatever area you tell it to be. So we'll just put it 100 from X, so X1, so we're going to start 100 pixels from the left hand side of the room, 50 down from the top, and then what we'll do is we'll just take room width minus 100, so whatever the room width is, it will just put it from 100 from there. So we're just going to create a nice square within the room. Oh, do it minus 50, like so. And hopefully, if I've done it right, that'll draw our table. Okay. And then obviously we're going to want to be able to get back to the beginning. So similar to what we did with the title screen, we'll just do a key press spacebar for now. And then when that happens, what we can do is we can take it back to move to a different room. So the new room will be room menu, like so. Okay, let's see if we've managed to get this right. Oh, first of all, we just need to put this object in the high scores room so that it knows what to do when it comes in. So just pop that in that room there. We don't need anything else in there. Okay, let's run our game and see if we can create a high score table with our score. Okay, let's just push spacebar to get in here. And we're off and running. So far so... Oh, no, just killed a baby. That's not so good. Killed the Eevee baby. Saved a nice one. I think we'd probably have to change the pace of this game eventually. Right, let's let it kill us, because I think we've got a nice enough score to see what's going on. Okay, so you can see the 2700 is the one that I did just as I was testing the game a second ago to make sure this was going to work. And 2800 is what we've just scored there. So as you can see, it's coming as the highest score at the top there. The high score table is within this rectangle here, which is 100 pixels from the left, 100 pixels from the right, 50 down, and the room height minus 50 here as well. Now obviously there's no names here. You could also do some draw text like we did with the score and put the high score table written up here or something like that. And we can actually create a way for it to take the name as well. So I think we'll just do a quick show just so that you can see how we can get the name in, and also just put the text up there, and then hopefully we should be good. If we push spacebar, it takes us back to the front menu, and then we can obviously come in again and try and get another score. Let's bail out as quick as we can and see what we can get. Oh, I know what we haven't done. We haven't reset our score, have we? That's ridiculous. We're starting too high. Okay, so obviously if we're coming round the game, we've managed to generate a bug here. Our score is 5,300. Obviously we want it to go back to 0 when we restart the game. Always good to work out the bugs. So let's do that now, shall we? So when we come into the title screen, it's going to be a new game is starting whenever this occurs. So when this is created, we're going to want our score to be set back to 0. Let's do that first of all. So set score to 0. We don't want it relative because we don't want it relative to what it was. So it'd be a plus or minus from whatever it was. We want it straight up 0. Okay, so that's got rid of that bug first of all. Okay, so if we're going to want to enter a name as well as the score into the high score table, we're going to have to use a little bit more code, but we'll try and keep this as absolutely simple as possible. So the first thing we're going to want to do is to create a new room that we can put the get name object within so that we can capture that information. So let's do that first of all. We'll just duplicate the high score room so we don't have to mess with any of the size settings and that, and we'll call this get name, room get name. We'll get rid of the object that's already in there because we don't want that, and then we'll just put that above the high score room so it's after the room main. Okay, so when we run out of life, we're going to want to see whether we have created a high score within the top 10 or whether we have not, in which case we want to go straight to the high score table. So to do that, we're going to have to change our object controller a little bit. So at the moment, if our health is less than 1, it will instantly add our high score in without a name and go to the next room. But we don't want that to happen. We want it to check first of all whether we've got a top 10 high score, in which case we'll enter our name, and if we haven't, it'll go straight to the high score table. So if the health is less than 1, what we want to do is we want to check whether we have got a top score or not. So unfortunately, to do that, we're going to have to add some more code. And we'll just put a little thing here. So check whether a high score. Okay, in order to do this, we'll go for high score value, and we'll check the 10th place. Okay, so we'll check that variable in itself. Will just check what the highest score is in the 10th place. We'll check what the score is in the 10th place. But what we're going to want to do is see if our score is greater than it. So if score is greater than high score value 10, we're going to want to go to room go to, and then we'll want to go to room, can't type, get name. And if our score is not greater than the lowest score currently in the table, then we'll just want to go to room high scores. Oh, I really can't type today. And like so. Remember to break our code up properly. Okay, so this checks whether we have a high score, and this changes what room we go to. Decide what room to go to. Okay, so no longer do we want these two little bits, but we will still need to add a high score, but we'll just put that in later. So what we'll do is we'll cut that so that we can use it again in a bit, and we'll get rid of the go to next room because we don't want that anymore. Okay, unfortunately we've got to use a little bit of code here because there's no way to do it with it using the drag and drop, but it's a good introduction to starting to use some code anyway. Okay, so I think that'll do for the controller object for now. If I remember anything else, I'll come back. So if we're going to the room get name, we need to know what's going to happen within that room. So we'll create another object which will control what happens within the get name room. So we'll call this object get name. And what we want it to do if we come into this room is we want it to get the player to enter their name, and then we want to store it, add the high score, and then move on to the high score room as well. So when this room is created, we're going to want to get the player to enter some information. So this will be get player name. Okay, so what we're going to want to do is get the player name. So we'll have to store this in a variable for this event. Oh, push the mouse. So if we put name to have as a variable, and this will be get a string, and the string will come up as a message box on the screen for them to enter their name. So if we put in get string and then have as a message congratulations, enter your name, like so, and as a default name we can just have Anon. Okay, so what that'll do is that'll generate a message box on the screen. The player can enter their name. We'll have this little message there, as we'll see in a second, and then once we've got that, we have a variable name which is the player's name. And then what we're going to want to do is to get the player to press the space bar again, and then once we've done that, we can make it add the high score. But obviously instead now we want to put in the player name rather than just nothing, so we can use the variable to pop that in there, and then we want to just move to the next room. So this object will, when created, get the person's name, and then when the player presses spacebar, it'll enter the high score into the table with that person's name that we've got, and then we'll move to the next room. So we'll just pop that within the get name room so that the object exists when we go to that room. And then hopefully that should be it to move on. So compile. Okay, so the game's compiled. So what we just want to do then is start a game and see if we can get a score and put it into the high score table with the name. So let's try and make sure we get a score before we die. Otherwise it's going to look a bit bleak. Oh, there we go, we're dead. Okay, so as we see, it's come up with the box. You probably noticed whilst I was doing this, I've put enter Yout name instead of enter your name, but never mind, we can quickly change that. So I'm just going to put my name into the box, which is Michael. Press OK. And obviously if you were generating this for someone else to play, you'd need to have a message here like press spacebar to continue or create a continue button, something like that. But since this is just for a little test run, we know that we push spacebar and it takes us into the high score table room, and we can see we've got Michael and the score of 1100, which is what we just got at the top of the tree. So just do another quick run through just to make sure that it's all still working. Score started at 0. Just get all this together. Come and kill me so we can demonstrate it works. Don't want to get taken by those because it will reduce the score. A really high score now. There we go. Congratulations. Enter mount name. So let's call myself Bob. Push OK. Push spacebar, and there we go. There's Bob at the top of the table and Michael down. And what would happen if we were to have all of these full, and then we didn't manage to get a score that would get above the 10th place, then it would just go straight to this screen rather than go into the congratulations enter Yout name screen. Finally then, what we want to just quickly look at is how we can add text to the game in order to provide some better context for the player. So we spoke earlier about putting in what the high score table actually is, rather than just having it display. So as you remember, we had the code here which is going to draw what the actual high score table is, but what we can also do is we can also just add some text to the screen as well, and this can just say, you know, high score table, and we can just put that, let's say 320 on the X, and let's just go for 25 pixels down, because the high score table starting at 50 pixels down. And that will just have that text there. And obviously we can do things like change the color of what it's going to be. As we've already set it to white when we were drawing the score, it will continue using white until we tell it otherwise. And once we get into the coding side of things, you can also align it, left, center, right, and all the rest of it as well. And obviously we can create some fonts and have different size fonts or different type of script and all the rest of it, but that will do for now. So we'll just have a quick compile and we'll just show that text in action. Or what I should have done is changed enter Yout name as well, shouldn't I? Just to get that fixed up, but never mind. Okay, so we've got a score. Let's get killed. Come on. That's more like it. Okay, and we'll just put our name in as Henry now. Push spacebar, and there we go. We have Henry in there, and we have high score table there. Now we've put the X as 320, so it started writing at 320, which is halfway through the room because the room's 640 across. So we can see it's written it there. What we would normally do is we just want to center that. We can do that with a little bit of code. I don't think you can do it using the drag and drop, so we'll just do it with the code. We'll just put a little note up here for us as well. So center the text, and then we'll just do draw, set, and then we want to use horizontal align, and then we just put FA center like that. So now the text will be centered. Again, we'll just quickly demonstrate that. Into the game. Let's get in and out as quickly as possible. Send us some more enemies. There we go. And we'll be Sally. And there's Sally in there. And as we can see, high scores tables now in the center of the room. Okay, so that's about it, I think, for this tutorial. It's given us an opportunity to have a look at how to create a game using drag and drop. The final bit, just to put the score in, we've had to use a little bit of code. There's no way to get around that, unfortunately, because of the way that the drag and drop options are. You can store the score, and you can oddly clear the high score table using the drag and drop, but you can't actually display it without using some basic code. But it does force you to begin to use some code, because as good as the drag and drop options are to get started, when you really want to create something, you're going to have to get used to using some code, but it's a very good introduction. Okay, that's it for me for this tutorial series. I'll see you later. Bye for now.